After a series of brutal attacks, a police task force uncovers a horrifying truth. The city is being hunted by an organized pack of monstrous, human-like predators. I'm Mr. Midnight Hollow, your chilling host. If you're already part of our pack, your support means everything to us. Each like, comment, and share helps uncover more stories like this. Or subscribe to see what rises from the depths of darkness and unfolds before you. Now, let's begin. John Red Elk drove his pickup along the gravel road that skirted the forest near Richmond's James River Park. Mist clung low over the pines, turning the world into shifting shadows. He checked the time on his dashboard. 10:30 in the morning. A deer calf, the kind that stood useless in a predator's path, had been spotted by hikers. Blonde fur, shaky legs, eyes too wide. He grabbed his flashlight and stepped out. The fog swallowed his boots as he followed the hoof prints, soft on damp earth. He saw where the calf had stood, then fled, leaving hoof imprints in the mud. But as he pressed deeper into the trees, the forest grew silent in a way that didn't feel natural. No rustle of leaves, no chirp of birds, no insects, only the heavy hush of old wood and rotting bark. On a downward slope, near a cluster of oak and sweet gum, the ground gave way to a dip where a small stream traced through rocks. There, the tracks ended. And then, something else began. He crouched at the edge of the water and discovered a series of footprints. One lead was clear, a large paw print too wide for any known dog or coyote. 5 deep claw marks pressed into clay. A second print overlapped it, large, flat, human foot-shaped, but with claw-like indentations at the tips of the toes. The dual prints morphed as if one creature had shifted its gait mid-stride. His breath tightened. He stood and looked ahead, the forest dimming as the fog thickened even more. John backed away slowly, heart thudding as he pulled out his radio. He tried to speak, but no words reached him beyond a dry whisper. The woods felt alive suddenly, and malevolent. He turned back to the path. His headlights cut through the murk for only a few feet. Then, at the edge of the light, he saw something crouched. Long limbs bent at angles that made no sense, fur in matted clumps, eyes glowing dimly in the haze. Strange, yellow, reflecting back his own fear. The figure rose to half-stand, then melted away into the trees. Instinct screamed for him to run. He rushed back toward the truck. When he reached his cab and locked the door, John sat for a long moment, pressing his forehead against the steering wheel, sweat cold against his skin. He tried to calm himself. This was a ranger's job. He had seen panthers avoid humans, coyotes scavenge, but never, whatever that had been. He switched on his radio. "This is Ranger Red Elk. I need backup. I found tracks. I heard something. Proceed with caution." No response. He cranked the engine. The radio remained silent. He tried again, but static. Frustration and fear weighed heavier than the fog. He thought of calling for backup on his phone, but the signal was gone, faded into the trees along with the road. His eyes wandered to the passenger mirror. The reflection showed nothing but fog. Then, behind that fog, something moved. A pale arm, long, thin, fur hanging off it in clumps. And then, nothing. He slammed on the brakes, but the sliding pickup skidded, wheels spinning on wet gravel. He fought the wheel, trying to aim the truck away from the shadows that seemed to approach on all sides. The motor died. The silence closed in, and the fresh air tasted wrong. Sour, metallic. John stepped out, leaving the door open. He gripped his flashlight and moved toward the back, reaching for his hunting knife, the heavy steel still mounted under the seat. He backtracked a few paces into the woods, pressing the beam into misted void. The only sound was his breathing, harsh and quick. Footsteps. Soft, measured, but not human. They pressed into mud, water, roots. The beam caught something for a second, then lost it. A shape, hunched, watching. A jaw too wide, a face half animal, half nightmare. Its head tilted, a hiss of air as if it were tasting him. John raised the knife, trembling, but unable to use it, stuck in shock. A low growl, deep and resonant, filled the hollow silence. The shape blurred and lunged. Then, nothing. John felt splinters dig into his palms. He dropped the flashlight. He didn't scream. The forest swallowed the sound. In the fog and gloom he scrambled, barefoot, blood mixing with mud. He ran blindly, bumping through trees, branches tearing at his jacket. He didn't stop until he burst from the tree line and into the blasted, empty parking lot of the park. Car lights glowed dim ahead, but no people. He collapsed beside his truck, gasping, cold with fear and shock. The deer calf tracks were gone when he returned. The only thing left was a smear of dark fluid on the mud, a stain that absorbed the moonlight. He tolerated the horror until dawn. As the sky shifted from black to slate, he stood and surveyed the forest's edge. No footprints, no signs, only old trees breathing in heavy silence. He called dispatch. His voice was shaky as he described the prints. "I'm sorry," he said, "but I don't know what made them." They sent out a team, patrol cars, woods crew, search units, searching for the missing calf or anything. Hours passed, the search grid widening, but no body, no fur, no blood, no clue. That night, John sat alone in his cabin, haunted by the forest's emptiness. Outside, the wind rustled through pines as if whispering. He didn't sleep. And tomorrow, he promised himself, he would return. He had to know what watched him. He had to be sure, before someone else disappeared. Because in the dark, something moved. Detective Harlan Wyatt had worked homicide in Richmond for over 15 years. He'd seen his share of overdoses, gang shootings, domestic stabbings. But nothing quite like what they pulled from the James River that morning. It was just after 6 a.m. when he got the call. A Parks Department maintenance crew had reported a foul stench near the Boscher's Dam floodgates. When he arrived, the river was still cloaked in early mist, and the sun hadn't yet risen high enough to cut through the gray. The scene was already swarming. Officers cordoned off the area. A diver, pale and shaking, sat on the bank, refusing to go back in the water. Harlan approached the tarp that had been pulled over the remains. The coroner met him halfway, her face pale under the weak light. "You're not going to like this," she said, lifting the edge of the tarp. There were 3 torsos. No limbs, no heads, just the midsections of 2 adults and what appeared to be a child. Torn flesh exposed ribs and organs, but what made Harlan's stomach turn was the precision. This wasn't a boat propeller or animal scavenging. The cuts were clean, surgical in some places, shredded in others, like something had sliced through with purpose, then tore the rest apart. "Facial ID?" he asked. "No chance," she said. "There's a wallet in one of the jeans. John and Maureen Graves, locals. Their kid, Olivia, 7 years old. They were camping near Pony Pasture. Park ranger reported seeing them 2 days ago." Harlan turned to the water. The current rippled softly, almost peaceful. But there was something else, a heaviness in the air. The same way the woods had felt when his partner was shot years ago, like the land itself knew blood had been spilled. "What animal could do this?" he asked. The coroner shook her head. "This isn't animal work. No claw patterns, no bite radius, that makes sense. Some of the damage it's layered, like whatever did this kept going after they were already dead." "You think it's a person?" he asked, already knowing she didn't. She didn't answer. Later that day, they traced the Graves vehicle to the riverbank near the Buttermilk Trail. Inside, the SUV was untouched. Camp chairs still folded neatly in the back. A cooler of rotting food. No signs of a struggle. Except one thing. On the rear window, a long smear of something dark. Not blood, not sap. Something darker, like tar, but with a metallic scent that made the forensic team uneasy. By sunset, Harlan sat in his unmarked car outside the Richmond Police Department, flipping through the preliminary reports. No known predators in the region, no human suspects. Theories ranged from bear attack to cartel dump, but nothing fit. The bodies had been drained of blood, not just bled, emptied. Then came the second call. Another ranger found something farther upstream, near a narrow inlet where the water turned into thick reeds and muck. This time it wasn't bodies. It was clothes, ripped shirts, a child's shoe, half a sleeping bag, shredded at the end like something had chewed through the fabric. And footprints, deep, erratic, pressed into wet clay. Harlan arrived with floodlights and a full team. The prints ran along the waterline, then veered into the woods. Some were human, barefoot. Others weren't. They were larger, heavier, elongated with strange toe formations. Whatever left them ran on 2 legs but shifted to 4 at times, bounding with tremendous weight and speed. They covered at least 12 feet in a single stride. He crouched near one, placing a ruler beside it. 17 inches long, wider than any human foot by several inches. He called over the forensic photographer. As they documented the site, one of the officers shouted from a nearby tree. "Detective, over here!" Harlan moved quickly. The officer pointed to something nailed to the trunk, nearly 9 feet up. It was the child's missing backpack, pinned by a long piece of sharpened wood, driven deep into the bark. The bag was ripped open, but not from animals or time. The fabric was shredded, not just torn. The tree itself was marked too. Carved symbols, not letters or numbers, but crude etchings like claws had traced them repeatedly into the bark. Vertical lines with interlocking slashes, circles intersecting triangles. It felt tribal, but older. Primal. The kind of thing left behind by something not trying to be found, but warning others away. "Who the hell are we dealing with out here?" One officer whispered. Harlan didn't answer. His eyes followed the symbols, up into the blackness between the branches. The forest was quiet again. No birds, no frogs, nothing. He felt something watching. That night, Harlan returned home and poured himself a whiskey. He sat in the dark of his small apartment and listened to the recording from the ranger's body cam, John Red Elk's final transmission before the signal cut out. "There's something out here. It's watching me. Big. Not a bear. Moving fast." Then silence. Then faintly, growling. Then the feed went dead. The last frame showed something blurry and tall, rising in the trees. It was distorted, too fast to capture clearly. But Harlan's gut told him what the others were too afraid to say. This wasn't just some animal. It wasn't a human killer either. It was something in between, something built to hunt. And it had just begun. At 11:14 p.m., residents of the Stratford Hills neighborhood called in reports of screams coming from the edge of the forest. A few minutes later, power outages struck 3 blocks along Riverside Drive. By midnight, Richmond's 911 dispatch was overwhelmed with reports of missing persons, animal attacks, and dark shapes running through the street. Detective Harlan Wyatt had barely closed his case folder when the emergency alerts lit up his phone. He sped down Forest Hill Avenue in his department-issued SUV, sirens off, headlights cutting through the trees. By the time he arrived at the scene, police had already taped off the block. There were blood trails on the pavement, thick, uneven streaks that crossed lawns and sidewalks like something had been dragged. He counted 4 houses with shattered windows. In the middle of the street, a sedan sat on its side, its front caved in as if something had crushed it from above. Sergeant Linda Cordell approached him, face pale under the blue-red flashing lights. "We've got 8 bodies," she said. 3 still missing. Some unidentifiable. I've never seen anything like this. Survivors? Harlan asked. Just one. Third house on the left. Young man, early 20s, covered in blood. Not his. Inside, the living room looked like a battlefield. Furniture overturned, claw marks across the drywall, blood smeared along the floor. The survivor sat in the kitchen, hands trembling around a cracked mug of water. He was barefoot, wearing a t-shirt soaked in someone else's blood. Harlan knelt in front of him. What's your name? Adam. Adam, I need you to tell me what happened. Adam stared at the wall, blinking fast. They came out of the trees. I thought it was people at first. Big guys, fast. But their eyes glowed yellow. They moved like animals, but stood like us. You're saying it wasn't people? No, it wasn't. They weren't wearing clothes, just hair in patches. Their hands were too long. One of them grabbed my roommate, bit into him, like a wolf. But worse. Its jaw split too far. What did you do? I ran. I locked myself in the bathroom. I stayed there for an hour until it was quiet again. Harlan stood. Stay here. Don't move. He walked out to the street. The forensics team was pulling body parts from beneath a collapsed porch across the road. A severed arm still clutched a cell phone. Another body, or what was left of it, was embedded in a tree trunk as if something had thrown it with enormous force. At the end of the street, something caught his eye. A trail of blood led into the woods, fresh, not dry yet. He followed. He moved cautiously, flashlight in one hand, service pistol in the other. The deeper he went, the more the forest absorbed the city's noise. Branches arched overhead like twisted ribs. And then he saw it. A shape ahead, on two legs, tall, hunched forward. Its back heaved with breath. Harlan raised the pistol. Freeze! The figure didn't move. He stepped closer. The beam landed square on its back. Sparse hair, grayish skin. Muscles like steel cables under stretched flesh. Then it turned. Its face was long, lips torn back in a permanent snarl, eyes yellow and reflective. It didn't charge. It simply stared, as if curious. Then it dropped to all fours and sprinted into the dark, vanishing between trees in seconds. Harlan didn't chase. He turned and ran. Back at the scene, ambulances had arrived. More officers, too. A low hum of radio chatter filled the air. He pulled Sergeant Cordell aside. This isn't a murder case, he said. What are you talking about? This is a coordinated assault. They moved together. They planned it. That thing I saw, it was watching me, calculating. This wasn't random. You're saying there's more than one? I'm saying we're being hunted. They stared at the woods in silence. A scream cut through the night, farther down the road. Another attack. More units were dispatched. Harlan stood by his SUV, trying to reach the mayor's office, but the lines were jammed. Text messages wouldn't send. Cell towers were failing. One officer ran over, breathless. There's something else, from the traffic cams. He handed Harlan a tablet. Footage from earlier in the night. It showed a section of Riverside Drive at 10:58 p.m. A shadow darting across the road, then another. Then, something massive slammed into a parked vehicle. It tipped over in a blink. The camera glitched. A few frames later, one of the shadows crawled toward the lens, sniffing, rising on its hind legs. Then it leaped out of frame, and the feed died. We've never dealt with anything like this, the officer said. No, Harlan agreed, but it knows how to kill, and it's not done. At 2:03 a.m., the city lost power. The grid collapsed block by block, street by street. Then the growling started again. The backup generators kicked in at Richmond General Hospital just before 2:20 a.m. Dim emergency lights flickered through the halls as the ER scrambled to process the influx of victims. Paramedics wheeled in bodies, some still alive, others unrecognizable. Most had been mauled, torn apart by something with claws too large and jaws too wide to be human. Dr. Evan Myers hadn't slept in nearly 30 hours. He was elbow deep in a chest wound when they rolled in the only conscious survivor from the Stratford Hills massacre. Her name was Cassidy Monroe. 34, a librarian covered in scratches, one arm broken, and deep gashes across her stomach and back. But she was alert, eyes wide, trembling uncontrollably. He tried to sedate her. She refused. "Don't let them put me to sleep," she whispered. "You've lost a lot of blood. You need rest," Myers said, gently placing a hand on her shoulder. "They're out there," she said. "If I close my eyes, I'll hear them again. I saw them. They smiled when they killed my husband." Myers looked at the attending nurse. "Page Psych. We need trauma stabilization, not meds." "I'm not crazy," Cassidy said, eyes locked on the ceiling. "I saw it, the thing in the trees. It wasn't just attacking, it was hunting us." Meanwhile, Detective Harlan Wyatt stood in the hospital lobby, arms crossed, shirt stained with dried blood, watching the chaos unfold. He'd followed one of the ambulances after the third neighborhood reported similar attacks. Same pattern. Total silence before the assault, power failure, mutilated bodies. A nurse rushed toward him. "One of the survivors is asking for you. Says it's urgent." Harlan followed her down a side hallway to a private room, where Cassidy Monroe was breathing hard, her eyes unfocused but alert. "They're not animals," she said the moment he entered. "They're something else. They know what we are." Harlan sat beside her. "Tell me everything." She stared at the window. "My husband heard something outside. I told him not to go, but he had to check. I watched through the blinds. He walked out with a flashlight. Then something grabbed him. It moved like a shadow, fast, low. Pulled him into the trees. I didn't even hear him scream." "What did you see?" She hesitated. "Tall, lanky, like a person, but wrong. Too thin. Muscles in the wrong places. And the face? It looked human until it opened its mouth. Then it was like the jaw unhinged, rows of teeth. And it didn't make noise. Not at first. It just stared at me. And then? It left me there, on purpose, like it wanted me to watch." Her voice broke and she turned away. Harlan stood. "We'll post security at your door. You're safe here." Cassidy didn't respond. He stepped out into the hallway where Sergeant Cordell waited. "The grid's still down in most of the city," she said. "The mayor's calling for a state emergency. We've got 3 more attacks. All within a 5-mile radius of the river." "They're moving in patterns," Harlan said. "Like a pack." Cordell nodded. "We're seeing signs of coordinated movement. Teams are setting up floodlights along the forest border, but it won't hold them." Then a call came through dispatch. "Unit 4, we've got a situation near Forest View Cemetery. Officer down. Something's in the trees. Repeat, we have movement in the trees." Harlan didn't wait. He ran to his SUV, Cordell close behind. The drive took under 10 minutes, weaving through darkened streets, tires splashing through puddles from the storm earlier that evening. When they reached the cemetery, the cruiser was on its side, lights blinking slowly. The forest behind the cemetery rustled. Harlan advanced, flashlight up, gun drawn. The silence was suffocating. Trees leaned in tight, limbs like arms reaching down. Cordell stepped ahead, scanning the brush with her rifle. Then, movement. A figure darted between tombstones. Harlan caught a glimpse. Elongated limbs, hunched posture, skin pale under the moonlight. It moved on all 4s, then upright, vanishing into the trees. They followed the tracks, deep prints pressed into wet grass, some human-shaped, others beast-like. Farther in, they found the officer, or what was left of him. His body was draped across a headstone, ribcage ripped open, spine visible. One arm was torn clean off, lying several feet away. On his chest, carved into the flesh, were the same strange symbols seen on the trees near the dam. Deep, curved slashes forming a twisted circle with spikes. Cordell turned away, sick. "They're marking territory," Harlan said, staring at the bloody carving. "This isn't random." Suddenly, a howl echoed from deep in the trees. Not canine, not human. Low, guttural, vibrating the air like a growl from something ancient. Then another howl, and another. Multiple sources, surrounding them. They weren't alone. Floodlights from backup patrols lit up the edge of the cemetery, but the woods behind stayed dark, impossibly dark like a void. Harlan and Cordell backed away, guns trained on the shadows. Branches snapped, leaves rustled. Something was coming. Then, nothing. Silence returned. The air smelled of copper and wet fur. They retreated. Back at the hospital, Cassidy sat upright in her bed, staring at the window again. The light above her flickered once, twice. Then it went out. Outside, something moved past the glass and smiled. By the following afternoon, Richmond felt like a city under siege. Roads were blocked, neighborhoods abandoned, and the local police department had shifted to a defensive posture. With power still out across most districts and communication limited, desperation spread fast. Residents formed impromptu militias, boarding up windows, arming themselves with whatever they could find: shotguns, axes, baseball bats. The smell of smoke lingered in the air from several structure fires that no one had time or resources to extinguish. Harlan Wyatt stood in front of a whiteboard in the downtown precinct, which now functioned more like a war room than a police station. Marked maps covered the walls, showing the spread of attacks in red pins. Nearly every incident traced back to the James River and the woods surrounding Pony Pasture. "They're nesting out there," he said to the room of officers and exhausted civilians who'd volunteered to help. "And they come out at night. They're territorial, organized. They hunt like wolves, but think like us." An older man stepped forward from the crowd, skin like leather, wearing a worn military jacket. His name was Nash Everett, former Army Ranger turned survivalist. Lived off-grid a few miles outside the city. "You want to stop these things," Nash said. "You go to where they live." "We don't even know how many there are," Cordell said. Nash lifted a hunting rifle off his shoulder. "I've tracked packs before. Bears, coyotes, wild dogs. But these things, I've seen their prints around my land. They're testing our perimeter, looking for weaknesses. That's not animal instinct. That's war." Harlan looked at the group. 8 in total. Officers, hunters, a couple ex-military, and 2 brothers who'd lost their parents the night before and wanted revenge. "This is voluntary," Harlan said. "We go in before dark. We hit them fast, hard. We get whatever intel we can. If possible, we kill one and bring it back. If we don't make it out, the rest of the city needs to know what we're fighting." They moved out just after 5 p.m., loaded into 2 SUVs and a pickup. By the time they reached the trailhead near Pony Pasture, the forest had already darkened. The sky turned slate gray. The air was thick with humidity and something else, something metallic and stale. They spread out in teams of 2, moving deep into the trees. The silence was heavy. Not even wind moved the leaves. Occasionally they'd hear a branch snap or catch a glimpse of movement, but nothing clear. Then Nash signaled. He crouched near a narrow ravine where the soil had been disturbed. Tracks, deep, wide. Multiple prints layered over each other, like a group had passed through recently. 5, maybe 6, he whispered. "Moving in formation. You see the spacing? These things know how to flank." They followed the trail deeper into the woods, down into a gully littered with animal bones, hundreds of them. Deer skulls, bear ribs, even dog collars. "Jesus," one of the brothers whispered. Then they saw the den. Built into the side of a hill, it looked like an ancient cave reinforced with branches and bone. Symbols marked the entrance, carved deep into the wood surrounding it, same ones they'd seen at the dam and cemetery. The air pouring out of the hole was cold, stale, reeking of death. Nash motioned for silence. Harlan moved in slowly, flashlight off, pistol raised. Inside, the stench hit first, like rotting meat left in summer heat. The floor was slick, coated in blood, viscera, and matted fur. Bones littered every corner, stacked in strange formations, shrines maybe, or nests. Then something moved in the darkness. A low breath, wet, close. The flashlight clicked on, 2 eyes reflected back, yellow, wide. It crouched on the wall, its body unnaturally bent, arms and legs gripping the stone like a spider. Muscle rippled under flesh covered in streaks of fur. Its face, half shrouded in shadow, twitched as it opened its mouth, revealing 2 rows of teeth, too long for its jaw. Then it launched forward. Chaos erupted. Gunfire tore through the cave. Screams echoed. One of the brothers was dragged into the dark, screaming, then silenced. Another creature appeared behind Nash, tearing into his side with clawed hands. Harlan fired into its chest point blank. It didn't stop. They retreated, dragging Nash, half-conscious, through the blood-slick tunnel. Outside, the rest of the team regrouped near the ravine, but the forest had changed. Shapes moved through the trees, circling. The pack had come home. "Move!" Harlan shouted. They sprinted uphill, creatures closing in from all sides. Flashlights darted through the dark, catching glimpses of jaws, claws, and pale bodies darting between trunks. One of the ex-military guys, Thomas, turned to fire, but was hit from the side, crushed under the weight of something that snapped his neck with one motion. They reached the trucks breathless, bloodied. Nash was barely hanging on. They pulled out, tires spinning, creatures crashing through the underbrush just behind them. One leapt onto the back of the pickup, slamming fists against the rear window before Cordell shot it point blank, blowing it off the vehicle. When they finally hit pavement, no one spoke. Inside the cab, Harlan looked back at Nash, who stared at the ceiling with blood pooling at his side. "You saw them," Nash whispered. "They're not done." "We'll come back," Harlan said. "Next time, we finish it." Nash grinned, blood between his teeth. "You're still thinking like a cop. These things, they're not criminals." Harlan stared ahead. The trees loomed in the rearview mirror. "They're not human either." By 9 p.m., the emergency radio frequencies were saturated with screams, static, and scattered distress calls. Richmond was falling. Entire neighborhoods had gone dark. Bridges out of the city were choked with abandoned vehicles or collapsed under mysterious circumstances. It started with the power grid. What remained of it blinked out sector by sector, like dominoes. Then the cell towers, sabotaged, some torn down. Now creatures moved openly through the city streets. They didn't hide anymore. Harlan Wyatt stood on the rooftop of the city's emergency operations center, overlooking downtown. Smoke plumed from several directions. Fires burned unchecked. Gunshots cracked in the distance, but nothing sustained. Just short bursts, the kind that ended with silence. "Radio's useless," Sergeant Cordell said, joining him. Her uniform was streaked with soot and dried blood. "They're cutting our lines. How the hell do they know how to do that?" "They're learning," Harlan muttered. "Faster than we can react." Down below, a group of civilians sprinted across Broad Street, pursued by something fast. Too fast. It leapt from the shadows, dragged one of them down. Blood sprayed against the pavement. The others didn't stop. Cordell turned away. "We can't hold this place. There's too many of them." "We're not holding," Harlan said. "We're evacuating, as many as we can." They descended to the command floor, now operating more like a bunker. Half the officers were injured. 3 lay dead under white sheets. The remaining survivors, maybe 20, were packing supplies, weapons, maps. "We move west," Harlan said. We've got a bus from Public Works with enough fuel to get us out. We take Monument Avenue to the expressway. We avoid the river at all costs." "What's the plan if the roads are blocked?" asked Officer Renner. "Then we walk." As they loaded the bus, the air was filled with the drone of sirens, intermittent, broken. Ash drifted down like snow. Somewhere nearby, a gas station had exploded. They moved in convoy. 3 vehicles, the bus, a police SUV, and a civilian truck outfitted with floodlights and barricades welded to the front. Richmond was unrecognizable. The Virginia State Capitol building was scorched. Storefronts were shattered. Cars overturned. Bodies lay in the streets, some in pieces. Blood dried in long arterial streaks across sidewalks and walls. But the worst part was the silence. The creatures didn't howl anymore. They stalked, coordinated, waited. At the intersection of Lombardy and Gray Street, the convoy hit its first obstacle. A pile of burned cars and debris blocked the way. Harlan stepped out, weapon ready. The street was empty. Too empty. The silence felt wrong. Not just dead, but hollow, like sound itself had been stolen. Then came the first impact. A massive shape slammed into the side of the bus, denting the metal inward. Screams erupted inside. Harlan opened fire. The floodlights caught a glimpse. Fur-covered limbs, a face twisted in rage, lips curled back revealing wet, jagged fangs. It ducked into the shadows again. "Move! Clear the way!" he shouted. Cordell and 2 others jumped to pull debris aside. More shadows moved at the edge of the light, darting between alleyways and rooftops. Then a second attack. Something leapt onto the roof of the SUV, crushing it. The windows burst. Officer Renner screamed as claws tore through the glass, dragging him out. His body was flung into a building with a sound of snapping bone. Gunfire broke out from every direction. Harlan fired into the dark, but the things moved too fast. The bus driver, a kid barely 20, floored the gas. The vehicle slammed through the gap in the barricade, sparks flying as it scraped against metal and concrete. "Go!" Harlan screamed, running to jump onto the back of the truck. Cordell fired behind them as she climbed in after him. A creature chased them, barefoot, elongated limbs pumping with terrifying speed. It slammed into the truck's tailgate. Cordell drove a fire axe into its shoulder. It didn't flinch. Harlan pressed his pistol to its face and pulled the trigger. It dropped. They didn't slow down. 3 blocks later, the convoy turned onto Monument Avenue, lined with historic homes and silent statues. The buildings stood like sentinels, watching the slaughter. On the steps of a church, survivors waved flashlights. The bus slowed just long enough to pull them aboard. 2 children, a mother, an old man bleeding from his thigh. "Where's safe?" the woman asked. Harlan looked at her. He didn't have an answer. A sound boomed across the rooftops. A howl. But this one was different, deeper, longer, commanding. The pack had an alpha. It was calling them, all of them. And they answered. They found the old man near the ruins of St. Joseph's Hospital, one of the first buildings to be overrun. His name was Samuel Blacktree. He sat alone in what used to be the hospital chapel, surrounded by broken pews and stained glass shattered across the floor like razor-edged confetti. Blood streaked the marble, but none of it was his. He was untouched, cloaked in a heavy blanket, clutching a worn journal to his chest. Harlan Wyatt found him while searching for medical supplies with Cordell and 2 others. They entered expecting another body. What they found was something far stranger. Samuel looked up slowly. His face was lined with age, eyes sunken, skin like parchment. But his voice, when he spoke, was strong, steady. "I warned them," he said. "I told them not to dig there. Some things should stay buried." Cordell knelt beside him. "Sir, do you need help?" He shook his head. "They woke it, a spirit older than these trees, older than this land's name." Harlan stepped forward. Woke what? Samuel held up the journal. Its cover was leather, stained dark with age, and something else, something crusted and red. I was a boy when I first heard the stories, he said. My grandfather called it the Hollow Pack. Said they were men once. Warriors who gave themselves to something in the dark. To survive the winter that never ended, they butchered their kin and fed the flesh to the trees, and in return, they changed. Changed how? Cordell asked. They weren't wolves. Not exactly. But they could walk like men and smell like beasts. Could run on all fours, or speak with mouths filled with too many teeth. The forest was theirs, and the forest never forgot. He opened the journal, revealing pages filled with hand-drawn maps, symbols, and sketches. Grotesque depictions of creatures with human torsos and animal limbs, their faces a fusion of man and monster. They were bound beneath the river, Samuel said. A burial site hidden for centuries, sealed with blood and iron, until the land gave way. He looked at Harlan. You've seen them. You know they're not animals. We've lost almost the entire city, Harlan said. How do we stop them? Samuel traced a symbol on the floor with his finger, one of the same crude markings they'd found on the trees and corpses. There's a den, a heart to the forest. That's where they return, where the Alpha sleeps. You kill it. The others will scatter. They won't die, but they'll break. Where is it? He turned a page in the journal, a hand-drawn map of Richmond, marked with old tribal lines. One point was circled in black ink. Raven's Hollow, he said. It's not on modern maps. The land was bought up, paved over, but it's still there, beneath the soil, the original ground. You find that place. You find the Alpha. Before they could ask more, a scream echoed through the halls, followed by gunshots. The creatures had found them. Move! Harlan barked. Cordell helped Samuel to his feet, and the group rushed through the back of the chapel, down into the sub-basement. The air grew cold, thick with mold and rot. Behind them, claws scraped stone. Something moved fast. In the generator room, they barricaded the doors with overturned shelves. Harlan drew his pistol, aimed at the entryway. I need time, Samuel said, kneeling. He used chalk from the bag he carried to redraw the symbol on the floor. This will hold them. For a while. What are you doing? Marking a ward. Old protection. From before the colonist. It won't kill them, but it'll make them pause. Enough to escape. From the hallway came a screech. High, sharp, metallic. Something slammed into the barricade. The walls shook. Cordell gritted her teeth. We're not going to hold this much longer. Samuel finished the symbol, his hands shaking. Go. Follow the map. Find the hollow. We're not leaving you, Harlan said. You don't have a choice, Samuel replied. You want to stop this? You go now, or everyone dies. Another slam. The door splintered. Samuel pressed a folded page into Harlan's hand. You'll know when you're close. The trees will stop singing. Then he turned to face the door. Harlan ran. They escaped through a side tunnel, climbing up a broken maintenance shaft into the alley behind the hospital. The night sky burned red. Somewhere behind them, they heard the barricade finally break. But no scream followed. Only silence. The entrance to Raven's Hollow wasn't marked. No street sign, no coordinates. Just a stretch of overgrown pavement on the outskirts of Richmond, where the land buckled and trees grew in unnatural angles, twisting like broken limbs. The road had once led to an old textile mill, long abandoned. Now, it led only into silence. Harlan Wyatt stopped the truck 100 yards from the tree line. The remaining survivors, Cordell, one of the brothers, and a civilian named Darius, climbed out. Each carried what weapons they had left. Shotguns, axes, makeshift explosives built from propane and nails. No one spoke. The woods ahead were quiet. No wind, no insects, no birds. The trees stopped singing. Harlan whispered, remembering Samuel's words. They moved in tight formation, flashlights sweeping the dense underbrush. The path narrowed quickly, the forest closing in like ribs around a throat. Strange symbols marked the trunks, some carved deep, others smeared in dark, dried blood. After 30 minutes of silence, they reached the center. A pit, massive and circular, dug deep into the earth. Bones lined its walls, human and animal, fused together in a grotesque lattice. At its center lay a stone altar, ancient, cracked, covered in claw marks and dried flesh. The den, and the Alpha, stood waiting. It rose from the shadows, taller than the others, nearly 8 feet. Its body was corded with muscle, fur sparse and patchy, skin gray and veined. Its face was elongated, more human than beast, with a skull that looked carved from stone. Yellow eyes locked onto Harlan. It didn't growl, it didn't charge. It watched. Cordell lifted her rifle. "We end this now." She fired. The shot hit center mass, and the Alpha didn't move. Then, without warning, it roared and leapt. The fight was chaos. Cordell was tackled first, her spine snapped under the weight. Darius ran, throwing a propane bomb into the pit. It exploded, sending bone and fire across the clearing. The shockwave threw Harlan back. His ears rang. His vision blurred. He crawled, bleeding toward the altar. The Alpha stood unharmed, flames licking at its legs. It walked slowly toward Harlan, savoring the moment. Harlan pulled the last charge from his pack, a shaped explosive. He waited. Waited until the Alpha was inches away, breath hot on his face, teeth gleaming. Then he triggered it. The explosion tore through the pit, collapsing part of the altar. The Alpha screamed, a sound that wasn't just pain, but rage. It didn't die, but it staggered, wounded, and it fled into the dark. The pack scattered with it, howling, retreating into the trees. Harlan lay broken in the mud, ribs shattered, vision fading. Only one figure remained, the surviving brother pulling him from the crater. "You did it," the young man whispered. "No," Harlan said, blood pooling in his mouth. "We slowed it." They limped back through the forest, the sounds of the pack fading into the night. Richmond burned behind them. They didn't make it far. At the city limits, they were stopped by soldiers. The National Guard had arrived, but too late. Quarantine barriers were up. No one was allowed in or out. They were taken to a mobile command post, questioned, isolated. The officials didn't believe them, called them unstable, trauma victims. No bodies were found in the woods, no Alpha, no den. The report said it was mass hysteria, a city gripped by panic, wild dogs, gas leaks, hallucinations. The truth was buried. Weeks later, Harlan sat alone in a secure room, bandaged, haunted. He watched the news, Richmond reopening, power restored, recovery efforts praised. He turned off the screen. Outside his window, the trees were quiet. But they weren't singing. Not anymore. And somewhere, deep in the dark, something was waiting to finish what it started. Because Richmond didn't survive. It was simply left behind. Richmond's descent wasn't just a tragedy. It was a warning. A city devoured from the inside by something that thinks, hunts, and never forgives. The Hollow Pack isn't gone. The Alpha was wounded, not killed. And whatever was awakened beneath those woods is only getting stronger. Like this video if you felt the terror of being hunted in your own city. And tell us below. What moment shook you the most? Share it with someone who still believes monsters are just stories. They need to know the truth. And if you're wise enough to want protection, subscribe to Mr. Midnight Horror and turn on the bell. Because next time the pack might be in your neighborhood.